I'm going to introduce sort of our lead / moderator of the next panel, and she is someone who has been introduced so many times it's a little daunting to figure out what to say. Luckily, Marion just posted recently, a couple of days ago, a video of Michael Pollan introducing her in Berkeley, and so I'm just going to say what he said, since that's someone we all respect in this room, who unfortunately can't be here, but has been engaged in some of this process. And what he said, among the many things, is that he has had many teachers who have been decisive in shaping his understanding of the food system, and then he in turn has been so decisive in shaping our understanding of the food system. And of the 3 or 4 people he named, Marion Nestle was one of them, one of the most important as far as he was concerned. And he said it was because she connects the dots between politics and business and the science of nutrition, and she does it better than anybody else out there. We are all familiar, I imagine I can say we're all familiar with her work, her books, Food Politics, her blog, her tweets, her constant acceptance of invitations like this to speak on behalf of some of the things that we all hold dear, and to provide in those conversations some really serious science, some strong passion, and just a clarity of understanding of those connections, as Michael Pollan said, that make you kind of go like, oh my God, like duh. And so it's for the duh that we're really glad to have Marion here. But there's also a personal reason I'm really glad to have her here, because she was the reason, the creation of the Food Studies Department at New York University, which was a project that undertaken by, with the help of Clark Wolf, who was also with us, and spearheaded by Marion, this vision that perhaps there was some other way to look at food and some more important way to look at food. I was involved in a very small way in that process, and then signed up to get a doctorate in food studies at NYU, which was so crazy. And so I'm grateful for her for doing that and for encouraging me to sign up, but equally and perhaps more grateful for her twisting my arm and guilting me into finishing. So it is with great pleasure that I introduce Marion Nestle to the stage.
Thank you, Mitchell, and aren't you glad you did? I've got slides. Is my first one up? Is somebody going to do that, or do I need to do that? Oh, thank you very much. I'm just delighted to be here to introduce this absolutely terrific panel, and I was told to do it by doing a little bit of scene setting, so I'm going to do that. My own work for the last 10 years or so has dealt with food systems, the food movement, and everything in it from production to consumption. And what I mean by that is the relationship between agriculture, food, nutrition, and public health. These slides have gotten screwed up. Is that a Mac? That must be a Mac. You can recognize it. Agriculture, food, nutrition, and health. When I started out in nutrition, I didn't think that it had anything to do with agriculture, and I was kind of late coming to that. But now I think you can't understand anything about the food system unless you understand the way our agricultural system works. And we're now in 2011, where the issues that relate agriculture to public health have become a very, very long list, and I've listed them here. From not having enough food, a big one, to having too much food, another big one, and the whole question of food marketing and processed versus real foods, what we tell people to eat, issues of food safety, obviously, and the food movement itself. Now, the food movement is big. And you can tell that it's big because the media has picked it up. It's not only that the New York Times says, is a food revolution now in season? If the New York Times says it, it's got to be true. But, and there I am under Alice Waters. I really like that. But the Washington Post, of all things, discovered food this year and had a big conference on the future of food, in which it had as its keynote speaker Prince Charles. This is the food movement going mainstream. Now, the food movement is, I teach food sociology, and the food movement is very, very different from classic social movements in that it is extremely diverse, extremely different, focused on different things, but overarching, the idea is to have a food system that's healthier for people and the planet. It takes different forms. The organic revolution, the animal welfare revolution, the locavore movement, the slow food movement, and the edible movement, which you'll hear about on this panel. We've already seen this. Its data on the success of the food movement can be marked by the increase in the number of farmers markets, which have gone from 3,000 in 1994 to double that now and more every year. You can also measure the success of the food movement by the amount of money that the food industry is spending on lobbying against it. And the best example of that is the amount of money that Coke, Pepsi, and the American Beverage Association spent in 2009 to try to fight the idea of soda taxes. They fought it very successfully. They have more money than we do. You can also see the success of the food movement in the extraordinary opposition that is taking place today in Washington to the Federal Trade Commission's rather benign, I thought, nutrition standards for marketing foods to children. The opposition to this has been so great that the head of the FTC has backed off on a lot of the ideas that they originally came up with, and 4 federal agencies have been defeated by the food industry on marketing to children. You can also see the success of the food movement in Citi Field, as I did. Calorie labeling is all over the place. I never expected to see it on vendors of Italian ices. But they actually, the guy actually gave me this button, and I was really sorry that I didn't ask somebody else because the peanuts were 960 calories. You've already seen that we have all these food movements, all these food movies. They're all over the place. They're enormously influential. I have a couple of bit parts in a couple of them. Michael Pollan is in every one. And they're enormously influential on students. Even more so this year, every magazine, every national magazine has had a food issue. The New Yorker, this has been going on for several years, but things like Foreign Policy and Audubon magazine and The Nation and Lapham's, of all things, had food issues this year. I think this is an example of how mainstream all of this is getting. And all you have to do is go on to Twitter or blogs, and I cannot keep up with, or track the number of people who are twittering about food or writing blogs about food, myself among them, but there are thousands of others. All of these are linking agriculture to public health in a way that focuses on food justice. And the food justice movement is a very important part of this in not only making food healthier for people in the planet, but also making it healthier for the people who are working in the system and for rich and for poor. And so what we have is a situation now where the big issues this year, the big new one is the Farm Bill. I'm teaching a course at NYU on the Farm Bill, and I'm calling this a media alert because those of you who are in the media ought to be writing about the Farm Bill. There is plenty to write about, and it will be politics, media, and money in action as you've never seen it before, because there's $300 billion at stake in this over a 5-year period. So another media alert, pay attention to the food movement. It's big, it's very effective. It's small but growing, and this meeting is a part of it, and this panel is very much a part of it. So at this point, I will call the panel to come forward. Heidi Arthur, Bruce Seidel, Brian Halweil. Halweil, I haven't seen you. You must be here. And Leslie Hatfield. Can you come forward, please? And I'm supposed to sit in that one over there, I'm told, so any of these 4. You know. We're very fortunate this morning to have an absolutely terrific panel of people who are working at the intersection of food and media in very, very different ways. You can read their biographies in the sheet that's been handed out. So I'm not going to go through all of that except to say that you need to listen to them with an open mind, with curiosity. Everybody will be mindful of the time, and I'm really eager to hear what they have to say. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for inviting the Ad Council to participate today. I'm really happy to share some of what we do to affect attitudes and behaviors surrounding a host of issues. Some are very food related. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Ad Council, we're a nonprofit organization, and we bring together the pro bono resources of the media, marketing, and advertising community to develop fully integrated programs to create change around a lot of pressing social issues facing this country. And we do have a couple of campaigns that are very near and dear to some of the topics that you're talking about today, as it relates to food insecurity, food safety, as well as childhood obesity. But before I get into our work more specifically on childhood obesity, I thought it would be interesting to look a little bit outside of the food category in terms of looking at some of our best practices when developing public education campaigns. So the first thing to consider is these social issues are incredibly complex, and communications can't begin to change everything. When you think about the issue of high school dropout, for example, 7,000 students drop out of school every school day. And there are a number of reasons why that's happening, from issues of teen pregnancy to drugs to bad teachers to infrastructure issues. And many of these things just cannot be changed by putting out, a commercial on air. So what we try to do is really define what is that PSA-able proposition. What can you actually ask people to do that will affect change? So the one thing that we saw that existed within the issue of high school dropout was that these kids are really great kids who have the same hopes and dreams as many students across the country. They just don't have anybody who cares. They don't have mentors, so they end up just giving up because people have given up on them. So our message is really, 30% of students aren't graduating, 100% of them deserve a boost, and you can go to a website where people can actually volunteer and get involved in their community. The second most important thing to consider is define your target audience. Just don't say, we want to talk to everybody. Our target is the American people. I don't think you'll accomplish much by doing that. You really have to define, who can I actually change? So when thinking about the issue of bullying of kids in school based on sexual orientation, we saw that there was a large group of teenagers who really didn't realize that they were helping to create an environment that was conducive to bullying based on sexual orientation by just throwing around the term "that's so gay" as a substitute for dumb or stupid. So by putting out a message that really redefined what gay really meant and highlighting the consequences, we saw in our tracking studies that lots of kids now stopped and thought before they used that kind of language in school. The third thing is really do your homework. Identify a consumer insight through a lot of in-depth strategic planning. And strategic planning really means doing focus groups, getting into the psyche of who you're trying to affect with your communications. And when looking at a campaign that we do on adoption, the ingoing assumption would be focus on these amazing kids who just deserve a loving family. That'll do it. People will sign up. Well, in fact, through our research, we discovered that one of the biggest barriers that was getting in the way of adoption was people just feeling inferior. I can't do this. I would like to, but I'm just going to be a horrible parent. So I'm just going to share with you a campaign piece.
Nice, Dad. Nice, Dad. Nice.
Charles!
Nice, Dad.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. There are thousands of siblings in foster care who'll take you just as you are.
So again, incredibly unexpected, and the results have been spectacular. We can say that roughly 17,000 children have been adopted out of foster care because of messages like this. And then the last thing is, resist the temptation to say too much. More often than not, we just want to dump everything in but the kitchen sink because everything's important. But people are only going to take away one thing. Get them engaged, get them to care, and then tell them everything else that you want them to understand. And this is an example of an award-winning bus shelter that we did around global warming a few years ago. Basically, cross your fingers and do nothing, or actually, be part of the movement and fight global warming. So those are just some basics to consider when thinking about communications and where you can really affect change. So when it comes to childhood obesity, we've had a long-term partnership with the Department of Health and Human Services and the USDA, and more recently we got together to create messages for parents to support the Let's Move initiative. And the first thing we did was identify who it is we're going to talk to, and we agreed, within our team that it was going to be moms, primarily of children 0 to 6, so that you can start the healthy behaviors early on in life and in the family. And that we really wanted to encourage mothers to improve overall healthy eating habits in the home, as well as, ramp up the physical activity. And what that really meant was learn about portion control, replace empty calories with nutrient-rich foods, and get your kids up playing at around 60 minutes a day. And we did a lot of quantitative research to understand where are we starting, what are the current attitudes and behaviors, and basically most moms, not surprising, didn't really think there was a problem in their home. Only 11% would describe their children as overweight, when we all are pretty well aware that the national statistics are incredibly higher than that. But the good news was they didn't think that they were perfect. There was definitely room to improve. Only 16% of moms thought that they were doing a very good job feeding their children healthy food, and only 19% thought that they were keeping their families physically active. And then we dug a little deeper, did some qualitative research, and again, I'm just summarizing, months worth of research here. And basically what we heard from moms was that, they're unwitting enablers of bad habits, and that getting their family to live healthier lifestyles was just really too hard. It takes too much time. Their perception was it's a lot more expensive. No one's going to have fun doing it. My kids are going to fight me. I'm too busy. Who needs that? And they basically throw their hands up in the air and just give up. When it comes to African American moms, again, someone brought up the issue earlier today about the importance of providing the right cultural context. We heard, more issues there. There are more things in my community that I'm concerned about that rise to the top versus whether or not my child seems to be a little overweight. And oh, by the way, my kid might be a little chubby, but they seem healthy, so what's the problem? I'm really, don't need to do anything here. And then through pop culture, there were a lot of, iconic women that were really being embraced for their fuller figures. So again, they're not really seeing the problem there. So through all of this research, we had to distill this down to what's the benefit? Why should I start listening to this new message? And by the way, what am I supposed to do about it? So the overarching key message was life really gets better when you take on healthy living, and that there are creative and easy ways to keep your family happy and healthy every day. And we can give you ideas. We can help you get moving and get going on this. So I'm just going to share a couple of examples of some PSAs that we developed. This is basically a web banner ad that shows peanut butter and some raisins, and it's basically ants on a log. This is a fun new way to serve up, healthy eating to your children, where they're not going to just say, I don't want that. And here's an example of a TV ad showing a mom being very creative about getting her daughter physically active.
Mom, can I have $1? Yeah, it's right. I think my purse is upstairs on the bed. It's not here. Check the dining room. No. What about your sister's room? It's not there either. The upstairs closet? The downstairs closet? There are no more closets.
Moms everywhere are finding ways to keep kids active and healthy. Get ideas, get involved, get going at letsmove.gov.
And then for the African American movie parents, we had this campaign called On the Daily, where there were just a host of things that you could be doing every day to keep your family happy and healthy. And again, there's simple, doable moments that don't cost a lot more, that don't require, major changes in your overall lifestyle. And here's a sample of the television ad.
Today is Saturday. Today is Saturday. Yeah. Salad on Saturday, fruit on Friday, double ball Thursday, water Wednesday, touch your toes Tuesday.
60 minutes of activity a day and eating well can help get your child healthy. So keep them active, because being even a little heavy could lead to health problems. Get ideas, get involved, get going at letsmove.gov. That's letsmove.gov.
And again, going back to doing your homework, don't make assumptions up front. We really had to listen to what Hispanic moms were telling us. That we all know that this community has higher rates of obesity, and that food is an important way of showing family that I love my family. I'm not going to give up on that. And most parents believe that being a little chubby was just fine. In fact, the term gordito is a term of endearment. So again, this is part of my culture. But we, through a lot of our discussion, we discovered that BMI was a new tool that could help redefine health and wellness for these moms. It wasn't necessarily about weight. It was just a new context to put some messages that ultimately they agreed were very important for their family to understand. So again, it's all this promise of a better life, happy, healthier family, but giving them something new to think about, a BMI, and then providing some real tangible, doable moments every day to make a difference. And here's the television commercial.
En letsmove.gov aprenderás pasos simples para prevenir la obesidad infantil y ayudarlos a alcanzar un índice de masa corporal saludable. Visita letsmove.gov hoy mismo.
And what we're seeing out of the gate is that the response to this campaign has been very strong. We rely on the media community to donate time and space. And in just 2 months, we saw roughly $11.7 million behind this campaign. And just for context, the average campaign gets about $28 million in donated media over a 12-month period. We don't have access to traffic to letsmove.gov, but through public information, we saw that there did seem to be spikes that corresponded with the airing of the campaign. And then we're going to go back in about 6 months and measure attitudes and behaviors again to see if we're moving the needle, and then use that learning to evolve the messaging moving forward. And that's it. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm happy to be here and included in such a prestigious event. Just to set the stage, I'm here representing a top 10 brand in the country. Food Network has become, in 17, 18 years that we've been in existence, a top 10 network in the US, and we now have channels in Canada, South Africa, the UK, and Asia. We have a magazine in conjunction with Hearst. We have business extensions, and we have many, many websites. So we're basically have integrated into all different categories of media. But just really to set the stage, what I wanted to do and talk about today, which is looking back at kind of how Food Network developed and what it led to the development of Cooking Channel, which is a new channel that we launched in May of 2010. Going back into the 50s, 60s, and 70s, basically cooking programs were on PBS with Julia, Graham Kerr, Martin Yan, and others. And really this came out of British television, which British television had cookery shows that were in mainstream television. But looking at that, there was many people, and in the early 90s when Food Network launched, it was really a gourmet mentality, very high-end cuisine, very New York-centric. But basically it was started by Reese Schoenfeld, one of the people who had started CNN back in the day, and it really was a news-oriented mentality of a media brand. But then as things developed and time went on, Emeril came on the scene. And Emeril was touted as the everyman of food. I mean, he was able to get people to cook who wanted to do nothing to do with food, didn't care about food, didn't have any interest in food. So I think that was really a pivotal thing. And there was others along that path that really aided to that, such as Mario Batali as well. But looking at the pace of life as we went into the 90s, with technology, our fastness, things were just happening very quickly. Life was good, the economy was good. This led to the notion of the quick and easy. So really we gravitated towards moving towards things such as Rachel Ray and quick and easy and 30-minute meals. And as you saw, consumption and consumers and brands across the country, that was what the driving force was that was going on in our society at the time. People were just busy. But as I look back, and when I joined Food Network back in 1998, I always thought that we had something for everybody. We had something from Iron Chef Japanese all the way to 30-minute meals. So it was really, you took away what you wanted to take away from the channel. But then an event that we just celebrated the anniversary of 9/11 took place. We went off the air on that day for about 2 or 3 days, and our Knoxville office, where our headquarters is, basically took over while we were trying to assess things here in New York. Within hours, people started calling and calling and calling, saying, please come back on the air. You are our friend. We need a friend right now. And this led to this whole notion of hiving that was spoken about back in that time, and community. Community has become such a big thing, especially online. At this time, 10 years ago, as these things started bubbling and percolating, there was groups of people started talking and so forth. And then in the television landscape, competition was on the scene. Iron Chef Japanese was very successful. We launched shows such as Food Network Challenge, which was all these amazing cakes and all of these things that you really just didn't get to see on television. But then there was one program and an event that took place, which I thought was really pivotal to our development, was when Bobby Flay was in Iron Chef Japan in an episode, and he happened to jump on the cutting board in honor of his victory. Overnight, we were in magazines and in media that we had never been part of before, such as Sports Illustrated, Time Magazine, spoofs on Saturday Night Live, Rolling Stone, and other magazines that you would think would never even write about food programming. The first time when I was in Japan for the program, I was walking down the street and I just started laughing. And I'm like, I'm in Japan working on a food show, and I never thought in America that anyone would be interested in things like that. But then as chefs became celebrities, into the 90s, an example of Bobby Flay, through this notoriety in Iron Chef, it led to him teaching people about grilling. He created the show that he's on in Throwdown. And then it led to other shows that we do, to the whole reality genre that's taken place, and other competition that's out there with Top Chef and Cake Boss, and even broadcast media is taking into the food category. But just really to sum this up, basically we became pop culture. Food became pop culture. You were seeing on gourmet menus across the country pop culture items. I mean, every great chef was making their version of mac and cheese and grits and so forth. But basically, this became foodtainment. It was entertainment, and that's what TV is. TV is a medium of entertainment and education. But as we were looking at things, and we conducted a study looking at food connectors, there was much more happening out there in the space. And all of these sub-communities have been developing over time in the last 10 years that of hyper-passionate people, and people really concerned. We were seeing on our websites in the last 3 years to 4 years, people looking for healthy recipes. They want more. They want more experience. And so this is what led to us at the launch of the cooking channel, which we launched in May of 2010. And basically overnight, this brand has become a success. It's focusing on cooking as the star, really through experiential, unique experiences, and food as passion and pleasure and sustenance. And really we're trying to infiltrate these messages that you're talking about today into our programming. We're doing such things, looking at seafood and sustainability, but exploring topics that on the Food Network we would only touch in episodes. We're doing a whole series about cheese. We're doing a whole series about seafood. And another thing that we touch upon, and in the small world that we have today that's closing in, ethnic food. We bought several shows from various entities around the world, mainly from BBC and out of Australia, on Chinese food, Mexican food, Indian food, Caribbean food. People love them, and overnight these were some of the most popular recipes that we were seeing on Cooking Channel. So it's really something that we'd like to explore more of. But in our brand, we believe that everybody who hosts a show on the channel really has to live this life, live their passion. Viewers today on television, they're smart consumers. They know what they want. They know what they like. They're either there to be entertained and have fun, or they're there to be educated as well. But basically, we wanted to deliver what people were looking for. So what I'd like to do is share a little tape, just overall what the Cooking Channel is about, to give an example of what we're up to. I press this twice.
Ta-da!
Ooh, yeah!
Woo!
Some people eat to live, and some live to eat.
This is as close to sin as you can get without getting arrested.
It's perfect.
That's why there's Cooking Channel. It's a destination for food people everywhere.
It's just an abundance of food.
It's for viewers who love to indulge in all their favorite passions.
24 hours watching people that came from all over the world recreate their culture through food. It's just to die for.
He takes my recipes and he Tuscanizes them.
Now, why do you use grappa?
I'm Italian. I put liquor in everything.
And who crave new ideas from the best chefs around the world.
This is kind of a cool restaurant trick. You take the egg out of the cold water and put it in the hot water to reheat it, and you have Eggs Benedict. This is Eat Street, where you'll find the most daring and delicious street food around.
It all comes together to make your palate go wow.
Cooking Channel is a network for food people, by food people.
A slice of pie is a beautiful thing, and it feels great on your face.
That is totally fat-free, and it adds a lot of flavor. This is like a Mexican fiesta in my face.
These chipotles add a really nice, earthy, and sort of smoky spiciness to this dish.
Where viewers see chefs serving up trend-setting new series.
My mission for today is to take my mom's original recipes and cut those calories in half.
The donut bread pudding is out of this world.
Don't put your mom out of business now, okay?
As well as fresh new seasons of their favorite shows.
There's another tip for you. When you're having people over, never, ever make something for the first time.
The easiest way to do this is with an olive pitter. But honestly, who owns a freaking olive pitter?
Food lovers everywhere are tuning in to see the kings and queens of cuisine take on new challenges.
Today I'm making 5 killer recipes that you can put together in just one day.
Break new ground.
You get burned one time. You learn the trick to put the fish down that way, not this way.
And take their craft to a whole new level.
I love experimenting. I've had a few disasters, but this one really worked.
Let's go, let's go.
It's a network that will go to the ends of the earth to discover unique cooking methods and ideas.
People think Indian food is so hard and complicated. It's so easy.
2 simple dishes using fresh mozzarella di bufala.
Solo está molido. It's the first time I use a meat grinder for salsa. I love it.
Uncovering new dishes and expanding the palate of viewers everywhere.
I'm headed to the legendary wok shop in the heart of Chinatown.
Plus, Cooking Channel explores the best of America's own backyard.
This is it. It's cheese as far as the eye can see. Woo, look at that. This is what I came to Houston for.
See the runny yolk running into the cheese, into the bacon, into the sausage. It's everything you could ever want from breakfast, all in one pizza.
From the best of the basics
The ingredients for this recipe are super easy.
to the most daringly delicious.
Just add that burst of flavor.
Cooking Channel shows viewers how to do it faster,
Dinner's done in less time than you could order takeout.
how to do it better,
It doesn't get any simpler than that.
and how to eat well every single day.
The result is deliciousness.
Sizzling,
That smells good.
spicy,
Absolutely fantastic.
spectacular.
Let's go, let's eat.
This is Cooking Channel. Stay hungry.
Let's get cooking.
So basically we're there still to entertain, but to educate and encourage people to take it upon themselves to cook and filtrate great healthy food into their lives every day. So thank you.
Good morning. In 2002, a graphic designer and a photographer from Ojai, California had a simple but revolutionary idea. They launched a magazine that was all about the farmers and bakers, chefs and brewers, and all the other food and drink makers in their community. They printed 6,000 copies and distributed them for free at wine shops and grocers and restaurants and farmers markets and other like-minded locations. The magazines disappeared within a couple of days, and Edible Ojai was born. Today, the national network of edible communities includes 70 publications and growing, all sharing the same mission wherever they are, a mission to chronicle their local food and drink community. Here you can see, in the previous slide, you can see a sample of some recent covers, including Pennsylvania ramps, from edible Allegheny, Ossabao hogs from edible Iowa River Valley plums, from edible Pioneer Valley, and little neck clams from edible Rhodey. This network adds about a dozen titles a year, and it's a concept that seems to work everywhere, in small towns and big cities, on the coasts and in the heartland, in red states and blue states. And apropos to this conference, with edible magazines, the medium is the message in more ways than one. We print on non-glossy, matte stock that conveys the sort of tactile, organic, salt-of-the-earth subject matter that we're writing about. Our articles are long format. The typical piece is a little over 1,000 words. We do have plenty of short stories and are rolling out dozens of apps and have quite active blogs that have a lot of short content, but our average content is long, and we will even print stories that are several thousand words in length. And most importantly, the growth of edible magazines mirrors the growth of the food system that we're writing about. That is, we are a grassroots, place-based publishing model that mimics the decentralized regional food systems that are popping up across the country. Edible magazines are locally owned, locally published, locally distributed, and supported almost entirely by local advertising, not unlike a farmstead cheese from upstate New York that's locally produced, locally distributed, and locally eaten. Just as the local food system is an antidote to concentration in the food chain, the hyper-local content of edible magazines tailored for a given place and a given time is the antidote to generic anonymous information about food. And we've found a very receptive audience. Let me steal a few pages from the Edible Community's National Media Kit to help define our readers. They are food and drink enthusiasts, but they're also influencers in the sense that they are at the front end of food and drink trends. They make food and drink experiences a large part of their lives. They want to spend more time cooking. They want to spend more time shopping for food. They want to spend more time reading and learning about their food, which I would say defines more and more people in America across all demographics. Collectively, our readership is at 1 million and growing, which puts us in the realm of the top national food magazines. And in many regional markets, we have more readers than Saveur, Food and Wine, or other competing magazines. In this media kit, we've got testimonials from Whole Foods Market and other advertisers about why our mission aligns with theirs. And even from food publishing pioneer Dorothy Kalins, who very generously said, edible is the answer to all that's wrong in the publishing business. But the testimonial that I think is most relevant for this audience comes from an edible Austin reader. Our readers, like this person from Texas, want to be inspired to take action, and we want them to be. This is a key difference, perhaps the key difference between edible and nearly all other food publications. Instead of aspirational, abstract stories about street food in Thailand or wine country getaways in Spain, experiences that many of us will only enjoy vicariously, all of our stories include concrete people and places that our readers can go and touch. Farms they can visit in a day's drive, products they can buy at nearby shops, local food politics initiatives that they can get behind. Consider that when we wrote about rooftop beekeeping in the inaugural issue of Edible Manhattan, it wasn't just to chronicle the very sweet honey that was being raised on the top of skyscrapers. It was to convince our readers that the New York City law making urban beekeeping illegal had to change, and pointing them towards the groups and politicians that were working for that change. And in fact, because of the good work of groups like Just Food and others, the law did change a few months after this article came out. Again, we aspire to help our readers change the world around them through what they eat and drink. And since changing the world is never easy, here are a few important ways in which we structure our message to accomplish this. And I smiled in thinking about some of the similarities in strategy that the Ad Council uses, that incredible Chipotle ad used. First, we always try to balance hedonism and sustainability. As our editor Gabrielle Langholtz often says, she doesn't want to hit them over the head with the moral or ecological message. She wants to sneak it into the story. She doesn't even want them to know that they're getting that message. Like all of us here in the publishing business, we work very hard for the limited attention span of our readers. It is a gift that they read our publication, that they watch our shows. So we entice them with delicious food descriptions. We garner their interest with community-specific examples and quotes from their neighbors who they might actually know. And then once we've got their attention, we slip in the mission-focused message, the call to action. Consider the story we did recently on ABC Kitchen. Actually, it came out a few months before ABC was named Best Restaurant in the Kitchen by the James Beard Foundation. This is one of our recurring columns that appears in a lot of the edible magazines around the country called Back of the House. And it's very different from your typical restaurant review. It's not about the ambiance or the volume level in the restaurant. It's the backstory. It's the backstory on why the chef is inspired to buy sustainable seafood. What makes the atmosphere in the kitchen perfect for serving local cuisine and for educating diners about that cuisine. Of course, we wrote about the incredible food, and of course, we printed beautiful food photographs, but more important than that, we try to inspire our readers by telling the story of the chef. Or consider this other back-of-the-house story we did on Roberta's, the pizza joint / internet radio station / guerrilla rooftop gardener hangout in Greenpoint. This article actually won a James Beard Foundation Award by our editor Rachel Wharton. But again, we were less concerned about, in this story, about their very delicious pizza, and their pizza is very good, than the community-changing mission of the place and what it symbolizes. Okay, back to messaging. Food is moving away from extremes, and we're accepting that at Edible magazines. The message is no longer black and white. It's not either or. It's a much more inclusive message that accepts the benefits of incremental change as long as it's moving in the right direction. Think of the evolving discussion around vegetarianism. Even a devout PETA activist will accept that there is a difference between a factory-farmed hog and a heritage breed of pig that's raised outside on a farm and slaughtered humanely. And that's not a conversation that existed years ago. It's okay to not be committed 100% as long as you're moving in the right direction. And we are welcoming of our readers, regardless of where they are on the spectrum, from locavore to food novice. We don't discriminate in that sense. And third and finally, while this is a realistic, concrete message that we're trying to convey, it's also an enthusiastic, joyful, and constructive message. In the early days of slow food, founder Carlo Petrini always made the point that the movement wasn't about marching in the streets. This wasn't a Spartan trotting movement. It was about making change through celebration and by living differently. So our message is not just about problems with the food system, but about solutions, and more importantly, solutions that are accessible to all of us. We speak to national needs and national crises, but we then offer practical and personal solutions. Consider the evolution of Michael Pollan's excellent writing on this topic, from the problems-focused omnivore's dilemma to the solutions-focused in defense of food and food rules, and most recently the very, very accessible Q&A format of the Times' most recent food issue. Think about Slow Food USA's very successful $5 meal campaign, where they took back control of the value meal language from McDonald's and inspired 30,000 Americans to send messages and images of good, inexpensive meals they had made at home. This message is joyful because we can all do it, and that feeling that Mitchell described at the end of watching that Chipotle video is the feeling that I want all of our readers to feel when they come to the end of our story. I want them to be on the verge of tears. I want them to be short of breath and be a little bit shaky because ultimately that's going to be the most effective message that we can convey, whether in print or in the digital realm or through word of mouth at farmers markets. Yes, we are changing the world, but we're doing this in a way that also makes us happy because we can, in fact, change the world. Thank you.
Good morning. New media and food is a gigantic topic and certainly one that I could talk about for hours, and I won't do that, obviously. But what I want to do during this presentation is give some quick shorthand examples of what's going on with new media and food and pointing out very quickly what I think are the most pertinent details of each of these, basically seeding some food for thought. And I wanted to start with some basic distinctions between the different types of media, traditional, new, and social media. And while you take a look at what I've laid out here, I'd like to jump on to the timely, very 21st century comparison that Joseph brought up this morning, the Occupy Wall Street phenomenon that's been happening for the last month here in New York City and has since spread to hundreds of other cities around the country. In this analogy, social media is like the protesters, including but not limited to the Occupy Wall Street group that sparked the protests. They are highly networked, but they're also individuals. The networks are fluid. We see people hopping in and out of different groups and coming together and dispersing very rapidly. Traditional media, then, is sort of like the labor unions, many of which have thrown their weight behind the movement. They are hierarchical in structure typically, and they've served a very traditional role in the public interest. And both of these are sort of trying to figure out where they stand in this rapidly evolving landscape that we call new media. New media then is sort of the whole gestalt, the whole enchilada. Everyone is represented there, from governments to corporations to protesters of all stripes and also observers. Basically, there's less structure than there was before, and there's a lot of confusion right now. So this Wall Street analogy is not perfect, but I do think that it's apt because I think the conversations that we're having about food systems and economic systems are similar, both in terms of sheer magnitude and their multifaceted nature. We're talking about man-made systems that we can talk about how they're the different ways that they're not working and different things that we can do to change them. Both of them have gigantic implications in terms of social, economic, and environmental justice. And lastly, it's an apt comparison because, again, nobody really understands what's going on right now with new media. So, still with me? Let's move on. This is a screenshot of a very popular game called Farmville, and I think I would be remiss to discuss new media and food without giving a quick nod to web advertising. We all know that our movements are being tracked, messages are being targeted toward us in ever more novel and sophisticated ways. Young children, as Marion pointed out, are particularly vulnerable because children under the age of 7 can't distinguish between content and marketing. So Farmville, an extremely popular, very social game where you can kind of farm along with your neighbors who are your friends, at its height saw 80 million active users around the globe. That's many more than we have actual farmers in the United States. And just to point out a couple of quick things about Farmville, water does not exist as a resource that plays into how you play the game. But a farmer can grow crops for Frito-Lay. And in fact, I don't know if you can see this here, but those are sun panels on the Frito-Lay farm for presumably to grow their sun chips. But it's not just marketers who are getting smarter. This is a screenshot from Grace's Eat Well guide. zip code searchable online directory of sustainable food retail outlets. It's an example of the vast amount of very rich data that people are sorting and organizing and making really easily accessible for other people. It's similar but very different from a much more famous online directory of food, Yelp. Yelp has a much more robust data set. It's crowdsourced, whereas the Eat Well Guide is curated according to sustainability standards. And this database organization idea is just one way that new media is influencing the way that we think about food. People are finding nutritional information online, they're looking at recipes, they're finding out how to raise chickens in their backyards, all sorts of wonderful things going on. So what's new, one of the things that's interesting about new media is that it makes it possible for businesses and organizations to speak directly to individuals. One campaign that I think stands out is the Meatless Monday campaign. I'm sure that you've all heard of it. Meatless Monday is brilliant in the simplicity of its message. Heidi brought up that idea of the simplicity. It's really easily adaptable, and it's been picked up by all kinds of people, from moms to environmentalists to corporate cafeterias. Even Oprah jumped on the Monday bandwagon before her last show. They've earned tons and tons of media coverage, and I think Meatless Monday has done a really great job of bringing the concept of meat reduction into everyday conversation. In a very different way, Bon Appetit, we all know that Fidel Baccio is being honored at tonight's awards ceremony, but what you might not know is that last year, Bon Appetit hired a woman named Bonnie Powell as their communications director. Bonnie is also the founder of a very popular food politics blog called The Ethicurian. She's also a very well-known and smart critic of industrial agriculture. So in hiring Bonnie, I think Bon Appetit found an opinion leader. We see a lot of opinion leaders rising up on new media. And they found an opinion leader whose values matched up with theirs. And I was familiar with Bonnie's writing. She's also has over the years become a friend of mine. But my trust for Bonnie's moral compass, and I would assume that many of her readers also had that trust, translated to trust for Bon Appetit. So those are two very different examples of different types of dialogue made possible by new media. Here's another quick and very interesting case study. Bob's Red Mill. Bob's Red Mill, a very popular, extremely well-trusted brand. Last month, Bob Moore, the founder of Bob's Red Mill, gave a gift of $25 million to the University of Oregon for childhood obesity research, which sounds great, right? Bob's Red Mill very quickly came under fire in a very public way on social media. This is a screenshot of their Facebook page. They came under fire from animal activists concerned with animal testing at the university. It took a couple of days for Bob's Red Mill to respond. Bob was actually on vacation when this news came out, but they eventually communicated that Bob and his wife had included a stipulation in that gift that none of that money should ever touch a project that involved animal research. So things calmed down pretty quickly after that. I don't think that maybe everybody was satisfied, but I think in the end, it probably helped to strengthen their brand, actually. But the moral of this story is that communicating with customers and followers is inherently risky, even for a trusted brand like Bob's Red Mill. When you communicate with individuals, they have feelings and expectations, and they're going to let you know about them. Some conversations are a little bit more predictably tricky. Last month, the U.S. Farmers and Ranchers Association launched food dialogues, largely seen as a reaction to the rise of the sustainable food movement on new media. Among other things, they've been accused of seeding the live question and answer sessions they had with campaign insiders. There's not a lot of really hard info on the site or in the videos, which are a little bit more emotional in nature. So is this transparent enough to be authentic From where I'm standing, this looks more like an attempt to regain control of the messaging around food that we're having while still appearing to fit within this new media paradigm. It's still early, and it's still early for all of us, I think. So just very quickly, some things to keep an eye on moving forward. Net neutrality, access, broadband access, which coincidentally overlaps largely with food access areas, privacy, all of these will help determine the nature of the conversation that we're having. How risky is it? How democratic is it? I think we'll all become more sophisticated and more savvy as we move forward. And our listening skills will improve, if only because they have to. And out of these better listening skills, we'll have richer and more productive conversations. Just quickly to close, I want to point out the parallel between the opportunities that new media presents and the goals of this gathering to convene different people, like Mitchell said this morning. And I would urge you all to consider who's not at the table and try to find ways to loop those people in. And let's dig in, both online and off. Thank you.
How much time do we have for questions? Whoever is keeping track of this. We have a few minutes. I'm going to exercise chair's prerogative and ask a question that I'd like everybody to answer if you can. I want to know how much this costs. I'd like to know how much an ad council, one of those little campaigns cost. What does a full-page ad in the New York Times cost? What does a program on the food channel or the cooking channel cost? What does it cost? I don't know about you, but I notice that the middle of the country, those red states, are devoid of edible magazines. What would it cost to start one? I want to move to Wisconsin and start one. And I don't know if you want to comment on the money issues too. So you want to start with you back there? Just quick answers, and then we'll open it up to the... Oh, there's a microphone problem. Okay. Sorry.
So the cost of a campaign, I think it's helpful to understand what you're actually paying for so that the dollar amount isn't out of context. A lot of research to define messages, the actual production of materials that could go online and print, on air, billboards, tracking, monitoring, evaluating, promoting, getting the donated media. So I would say, in general, over a 3-year period to run a campaign, it's probably around $2 million, and then the return on investment is, could be upwards of $60 million to $100 million in donated media across that 3-year period.
Great, thank you.
In producing a show, you'll have to look at all the different factors if it's a studio show or traveling around the world. So a show can cost anywhere from $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 an episode on up to $500,000 an episode for a reality type program.
Right.
I think the map is a little bit misleading for a couple reasons. One, the population. I think the fact that there are not that many edible magazines in the Midwest is partly a result of population distribution. They do exist in Iowa, Michigan, a lot of Corn Belt states, Montana. The Dakotas are about to launch, so there are some that aren't there on the map, and probably some that I don't even know about. The edible communities sells a licensing fee to each of the local publishers. That price varies based on the location, and it's also gone up as the network has grown. I think the current cost is $125,000 to start one. The operating costs of the magazine, however, are very low compared to a traditional publishing model. There's no sort of corporate overhead, and there aren't a lot of the other sorts of costs associated with larger publications. So you find many people starting these as a second career. Many people get small business loans to start the magazine. And at least our experience in Manhattan, Brooklyn, and on the East End it was that the magazines became profitable within a couple of years, which is also quite different from typical publishing model.
I'll just quickly say that I think a lot of us think that new media is very cheap, that it's very cheap. Anybody can start a blog.
That's why I'm asking.
Yeah. But I think all of these things do cost money, especially putting together robust sets of information. All of that updating takes a lot of time. Writing a blog post takes a lot of time. And if you're not getting paid for it, then that largely determines who's part of this conversation.
Yeah. So thank you to all. I'll open it up to the floor if anybody has questions, comments. I can't see, so you may have to, oh, good.
Thank you, everyone. And this question is for Bruce. And I'm wondering if you've ever considered a farming channel on the Food Network, because we see celebrity chefs, but we never see celebrity farmers. So I'm curious if this is something you'd entertain.
We haven't entertained a whole channel about farming, to answer that question, but we've talked about different shows. You know, there are some programming out there, such as the Beekman Boys, which is on Planet Green, and other things, and we're exploring those topics. It's a matter of finding those right people and right personalities for television to really bring a show to life. So it's not a topic that we're afraid of, and something that we're exploring.
I was on the Food Channel the first week that it was on, and I got fired.
I got fired from the web show I hosted. So. Susan.
I have a question actually for Heidi Arthur and the Ad Council. I think for many of us in this room that are, involved with, all kinds of movements, as Brian spoke to, that you don't have to be 100% behind them, but just be moving in the right direction. I love that line. How does the Ad Council make a decision to get behind a certain PSA campaign? I think people would love to know the rigor involved. I mean, seeing Let's Move is not that surprising, I think, to most of us. But how did you decide on them versus maybe another nonprofit?
That's a great question, and we get asked that quite often. We're a small nonprofit, believe it or not. I think the perception is, or the misperception is that we're an industry association, but we have finite resources to put against the development of these campaigns. So we have a board of directors, and they hear proposals on a regular basis from nonprofits, from government agencies, and there are basic criteria that you have to meet in terms of being non-denominational, nonpartisan, an issue of national importance. But importantly, you have to be able to have a tangible action that you want people to take, and you have to have measurable outcomes that you're looking to achieve, and then have a long-term commitment to having all of the things in place in order to affect change. So, we have a range of issues on our docket, and we consider them all very, very carefully. And it's a good thing that staff doesn't decide, because we would do everything.
Who has the microphone?
One more.
I've got one over here.
Ah.
Hi, I'm Richard Martin from Food Republic. I had a question to anyone really about, some of the corporations must be getting smart about all this, food stuff going on. Has anyone on the panel been confronted with the situation where, a company that's potentially doing not so nice things wants to advertise and, get their message across, and it might be a little murky?
It's called co-optation.
I cross-published a blog post that I wrote on the Huffington Post a few years ago about mercury and high fructose corn syrup, and the Corn Refiners Association took out an ad on that page. It's still there if you ever visited that blog post.
Yes. I think the answer is yes.
And I will say that, and this part might partly be the result of Edible Magazine's editorial mission and stance. We haven't had to confront those sorts of choices yet. McDonald's is not approaching us. Monsanto's not approaching us. We attract like-minded advertisers. There's a very heated discussion within edible communities among all the publishers of what would we do if those sorts of companies approached us to roll out campaigns. Personally, I'm open to corporations that want to advertise their good deeds, if they're legitimate good deeds. General Mills is one of the largest owners of food aid in this country. A lot of large agribusiness companies have charitable foundations that do interesting things. But it is clearly a sensitive topic. But it's worth mentioning that we haven't had to confront that, because I think a lot of our advertising is self-selecting.
Many of you have questions, and I have a bunch too, and we're all jumping out of our seats, but I think we have to stop.
We probably do have to take a break, but the good news is that you're not going away, right? So we're going to have a chance to ask some questions of them at the tables. Let's give them a big hand for all the hard work.